And again, welcome everybody. I'm sure Stonehenge is trying to tell us something. And again, we are talking about drones, which could be physically real. We want to remind you, any physically real item could potentially hurt somebody or damage something. We advise, do not create any physically real item unless you can manage it in a way that is legally allowed and reasonable and safe. I think it's always fun to start out with Google Earth. We were looking at Gunnison. I think Gunnison is just pretty. Denver is right up in here. I did not know that I was so close to Denver. I was looking at a place called Gunnison National Park. I wanted to get a place for working with the drone where we were up in the air, but there was a valley down below. And here is the metropolis of Gunnison. In terms of discussing the drone, I wanted to do some discussions where it's flying around and people are using it for this and that. I didn't really want to do this with imagery from a foreign country. Here's a little runway and Gunnison. And you can actually take the little guy and put him, let's see where you can put him. And there's the runway. There's the mountains. I guess the W is for why are you here? Who knows what that's for? That's kind of fun. One of the things I wanted to evaluate was the use of the drone in a variety of military type settings. And here we have the small metropolis of Crestone. This is showing me the altitude down here. Crestone is at 7,800 feet, and the Crestone Peak is at 12,000 feet. So it's 3,000 or 4,000 feet of elevation from here to here. If you bring down the street view, it looks like they sent a camera up here. And you can look around and sometimes there's panoramic views down into the valley. There's Crestone is down. You can see that here's this valley here. So I don't know that you could do drone operations right here, but you could do from this Crestone Peak. Here again, this is at 12,000 feet, that elevation. And this is at 7,000 feet. So this is a fairly flat area here where you could land the drone. You'd be at 12,000 feet and you could be 6,000 or 7,000 feet above this area here, and you could do some drone work. It's just kind of pretty. And what we're going to discuss is how is it going to be when the military decides to just add drone type flying into the military capabilities. And I want them to send these drones out to the distant and isolated outposts that have no really quickly available combat air support because it's far away, back where the big central command is that has the nice runway. And the drones are VTOL. So the base, the little isolated outpost, doesn't need a runway. They just let the drone go straight up in the air and fly off. And it was intriguing to me, how would that get initiated and put in place? And I'm going to create a story. I'm simply making it up. So I don't want to offend anybody or upset the military. It's just me thinking out loud. And I will get some images from my SketchUp on the topic of the drone, just showing various parts and structures of the drone, the hydraulic pump, hydraulic motor drone concept. And I'll run those images while I'm talking about the initiation of this new program, just so you have something to look at. And I'm not really going to discuss the images. They're just there for you to see, have something to look at. All right, well, I got it a little bit more clear with Google Earth. The problem is, if you get back far enough to see what you're seeing, it gets confusing. But this is Denver, so we're looking at up here near Gunnison. And so if we put this on Denver and go out here to the Crestone Peak, 172 miles, looks like south of Denver. And I marked some places here. Okay, here's the little town of Crestone. And I'm showing the elevations down here. So Crestone itself is at 7,900 feet, which is interesting because you could drive the drone here and take off and go up in the air 100 feet, and you would be testing your drone to see if it will work at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, which is useful. I did not realize there are places where you might even have to have oxygen capability on your drone. But then I went to Ukraine, and most of Ukraine is like 400 feet in elevation. And the reason I wanted the drone at 9,000 feet, I feel like simple enemy forces on the ground, they're going to have trouble shooting up at something that's 9,000 feet in the air. I know that sophisticated systems might be able to hit that, but not unsophisticated systems. So I wanted the drones to be up at 9,000 feet. But that means if Crestone was your area of military engagement, you would have to have your drone at 17,000 feet. And it's interesting because as you get higher, the air density goes down and you have to spin the propellers faster. You can get to practical limits on how high in the air you can get the drone to go with the propellers. Now you might be able to get it up there with the wings. But anyway, I just wanted to look around a little bit. One of the things that intrigues me is to do some testing with respect to, and it takes me a minute to get this straight. Moving the drones up and down across an area of elevation, and for example, here is Crestone. You go down this way to whatever this is, and you can come up this valley here. Now I'm showing the elevation. So Crestone is 7,900 feet. This zone here is 8,000 feet. Up here at the top of this peak is basically 14,000 feet. So you're elevating your drone by 6,000 feet if you flew it from here to here. And the distance from Crestone that's 4 miles. And the question is, I don't know if this Google Earth mapping system is, I don't know how it's handling the fact that you're going up in altitude, but it's 4 miles. So if you were down there at this Cottonwood Creek trailhead 4 miles from Crestone and wanted to do some altitude work with the drone, you could elevate your drone by 6,000 to 7,000 feet just flying up this hill. And now if you they have here in Google Earth the street view, and so when you put the street view guide down here, the little blue dots are places where the street view has been taken to. So here is Crestone Peak. I'm trying to remember where I think Crestone Peak. And we'll come around to the this I don't think is a place where you could land the drone. I mean, you can look at the ground. There's whoever took this picture. This, I think, is that valley where Crestone is. So my thinking would be you could test the drone by flying up this valley here. This is pretty soft and flat area where you could land the drone if you had to. And you could fly all the way down here, put it down if you had to, and do some testing with it. I found, okay, here's Milwaukee Peak. Now over here is a, this is listed as a trailhead. So you can get your equipment up to here, but getting from here over to there would be tough. If we again do the street view, you can see there's a little blue point here, so we can put the guy right there and survey that valley. This is 13,000 feet, and that is, well, it's saying 13, but that valley down there is at 7,000 or 8,000 feet back down in here. It just isn't. It's because it's street view. It's keeping you at the level of street view. And I don't know that you would be able to land the drone here. But and this must be the companion of whoever took this picture, but you certainly could come up this valley with your drone and do some testing. And it would be cool. That would be fun, I think. Anyway, I just thought I would let you see that. And again, hello everybody. We're creating a video on the introduction of people carrying large heavy lift drones that can carry people into a military setting. There's a lot of interesting issues there. Of note, the drones themselves are autonomous. They can take off and fly to their destination and land on their own. So that has an effect on, I think, how the drones are introduced into military service. I think I will talk about it in a manner of simply just creating a story. It's a story that I made up myself. I do not want to offend the military or anybody. And it's hard to believe that drones would be introduced in the military in exactly this way. I'm just exploring exactly how is this going to happen. And we will talk about a military setting. It begins with a sergeant, Sergeant Charles Miller. Charlie, everybody calls him Charlie that knows him. Military police is his major activity in the military at this time. He is at a base. The name of the base is Greenville. In this theater of war, they give the bases names based on geographical names. So there are a variety of these bases spread out through the combat area. He is at base Greenville, or sometimes it's called Greenville Base. He's inside. They have the same 16 to 18 foot sandbags filled going around the outer perimeter of the base. Just a standard United States military base construction technique. The base Greenville is at the periphery. There is a major central command facility with a large airfield and all of the senior commanders far away. Base Greenville is one of a series of small bases that are out near the perimeter edges of the battle area. Base Greenville is not very big. Maybe it's got 5 to 7 acres inside the wall and perhaps 120, 130 people. Charlie was walking in the outdoor area that, because it's a potential combat area, they don't like everybody congregating and spending a lot of time just simply outside, but they certainly cut across the walking ground or the parade ground to get from one side to the other. Charlie has noticed that it's 11 a.m., which is when the cafeteria, the mess hall, opens up for lunch, and his thinking process is to get over there and get his lunch. And there is a little place in the back where they've put up a kind of a relatively reinforced roof to serve as an awning, so that if you happen to be there when that's open, you can sit outside or sort of outside and be under that awning and eat your lunch. If you get there, as again, Charlie's plan was to get there early and get to that table before somebody else did. So he had his mind on that. He was a little bit considering his jobs for the day and was moving across that open area when one of the other sergeants of the base caught up, walked near to him and said, "Afternoon, Charlie. It sure looks to me like you're headed towards the cafeteria for lunch." And Charlie looked at him and said, "Well, I am." And he went, "No, you must have, maybe, no way you didn't get the note. You probably have forgotten. We're supposed to have a meeting, There's a meeting of all of the sergeants. They've called us to this area where the executive officer and some of the other officers have something they're going to discuss with us. None of us really know what it is, but they wanted all of the sergeants to be there. So you need to just think about your cheeseburger and change your direction there and head off towards this meeting." And Charlie thought to himself and remembered that meeting and really almost had himself convinced he didn't need to go because couldn't possibly be something that the military police have anything to do with. But he thought, well, I guess I've been caught. And off to the meeting he went. Inside the room were, really, as had been said, all of the sergeants, the executive officer, and one other officer were up in the front of the room at a table. There were a bunch of cardboard boxes up there and the briefcase of the executive officer, and he had some paperwork on the desk. Everybody had filed in and were seated, and just that murmuring talk that happens when a meeting has not quite yet started. The executive officer stood up. Everybody stood up. He said, "Okay, thank you. Please sit down. Welcome to everyone. We want you to know the United States military has instituted a new program that involves drones, which are devices that fly. They can take off in a completely VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing capability, and then they can fly with their wings." And he said, I want you to notice as I'm giving this lecture, I am referring to this document. It is a printout of a rather extensive email that I received and other emails to put this presentation together. The military has concluded that it makes sense to create what the military is calling a combat aviation group. This will be a group at this base. They are not going to create a combat aviation group and send it to us at the base. We are going to make the combat aviation group from the people who are already here. We have an extensive set of emails with page after page of what we're supposed to do from a leadership viewpoint, and we are now doing that email. And one of the steps is to have this meeting and lay it all out to you and then get it going. We have been told that we need to have the people who will be the combat aviation group, and that is what this is all about. The combat aviation activity will consist of the military sending this base a total of 3 of these drones. We are supposed to figure out which drone we want. That decision will be made by the commanding officer and his leadership team of officers. We will let you know what we choose. We think that's all already done in terms of they've already asked us and we've already told them, but nothing is here yet. So we don't know if they approved of it or what, but we're supposed to put this together. It is supposed to give us combat air support type of an ability based on equipment that we own at our base, so that we don't wait 20 minutes or a half hour or an hour. If we need combat air support type activities or just aircraft activities, this new system, this new approach will have us having our own equipment that we can activate whenever we want to. And as you know, I am reading to you off of this email that's been sent to me. So that's what it says. I don't know that we have combat aviation group capability anywhere in the military. So I can't tell you what it would be like for real or have experience with this, because I don't think it exists anywhere yet, but it's going to. We are not the only base to receive that. And we are, of course, happy and delighted that you, the sergeants, have agreed and understood and support this and are going to help us to put this together. The XO looked up at all the sergeants. All of the sergeants looked back at him, the truth is, all of the sergeants, mostly, I'm sure, were saying in their head, I've never heard of any of this. And I don't remember that I created it or approved it or anything, but okay. The executive officer then went on to say the combat aviation group we have put together is ready, and we are, of course, delighted that the sergeants have agreed to participate in this program and have agreed to be the program and to volunteer to help us to create this capability. We do need to introduce you all to the combat aviation group. The size of it will depend upon how well this works and how much equipment we need, and as we figure out how many people are needed, we will probably change how many people are in the combat aviation group. We do have a pilot, a person who will get, we call him a pilot or her a pilot, to get in the flying machine and be in charge of it and get it going through the air to do its mission. Missions include carrying equipment, carrying supplies, carrying munitions, carrying ammunition, medical transport, transport of fuel, food, whatever we need. Our planes are to fly near to and around us for the benefit of our base. We're not supposed to be flying off to other bases or other combat areas to support that. That is not the purpose. Sergeant Charles Miller, military police. Charles Miller, if you would, are you here? And of course, Charlie, who had been sort of drifting along listening to this, got a little more interested or a little more alert and said to himself, that's my name. And he straightened up, raised his hand, looked at the executive officer and said, here I am, Sergeant Charles Miller. You may, everyone calls me Charlie. I'm here. The executive officer said, well, congratulations, Charlie. We are so happy that you have agreed to volunteer to be the pilot and flight person that flies this drone system. Part of this email is the documentation of all of that. I've got it in my hand here, and I've already signed my name. If you will walk up here and please sign your name, it's got a line there for you, and we'll go on to the next step. And with that, he looked up at Charlie, and Charlie kind of looked around. He could tell all his friends were looking at him like, what? But he's a soldier, and he stood up and walked up to the front there where the table was and looked at the document. I mean, he'd never seen any of this ever. And the executive officer said, here's the line right here, you sign. And if you would, Charlie, you can see we've got 5 chairs over here next to this table. We'll go over there and sit down. Thank you again. He said, Sergeant Carol Monroe. Carol, are you here anywhere? In the back with the artillery group, one of the ladies looked up, looked around. All of her friends got a little wide-eyed and looked at her like, that was your name. And she held her hand up and said, Sergeant Carol Monroe, I am here. And the executive officer said, very good. If you will, again, all of us are delighted that you have agreed to run this combat aviation group. And if you'll come on forward, I have another page in this email for you to sign. She actually had the same look on her face that Charlie had. I'm sure she was, as Charlie was, rolling around in her head the last few months trying to remember if she ever had even heard of this, much less understood it or agreed to it. But she too was a soldier. Walked to the front. The XO again pointed out the line. She signed it. He said, if you'll go over there and sit next to Charlie. We also have Sergeant Robert Gomez, Sergeant Mike Palmer, and Sergeant Norman Turncoe. Sergeant Gomez is with the motor pool. So is Sergeant Palmer. Sergeant Turncoe is with the artillery. You guys, if you would, are you here? Would you raise your hands? Again, the room was getting quieter and quieter. And everyone was like, what is going on here? And they raised their hands, and the executive officer said, thank you, gentlemen. If you will come up here, you are well known in this base for your ability to keep our equipment functioning, to keep the heavy equipment properly working, and to take care of problems, and to do emergency fixes as needed. We are certain that the artillery group and motor pool will miss you, but you are now the ground crew, support structure, maintenance, troubleshooting, and general keep this working group to run the combat aviation group, the equipment, the drones, and we will have Sergeant Gomez will be in charge of that area. And so if you three would come up here and sign your forms and sit next to Sergeant Miller and Sergeant Monroe. There we go. This is now in place. Sergeant Miller will be overall in charge of this. Sergeant Monroe is a paramedic and has done extensive paramedic and medical care work. Here at the base, we do have a physician's assistant, but it was our decision that we can't have our medical person flying away in an airplane, so she will. And she will be of the two people who fly in the drone. Sergeant Miller flies in the drone, and Sergeant Monroe flies in the drone. She is there to run the mission, the medical care mission of the drone. We might have an ammunition weapons delivery mission, and someone will be chosen for that. Those weapons are not yet on these drones, and so we're not going to do that yet. To the extent that the drone has a supply or provisions or equipment movement mission, Sergeant Monroe will also be in charge of that. And so if everyone would stand up, and I'll stand up, we'll give them a polite round of applause and thank them for their service in doing this for us. And of course, you know, Sergeant Miller now essentially has a type of a command. Welcome to your command, Sergeant Miller. And the XO stood up and gave him a salute, and Sergeant Miller saluted back. He said, Sergeant Monroe and Sergeant Gomez, both of you have a type of a sub-command in the combat aviation group, and you are in charge of what you are in charge of, again answering to Sergeant Miller and the leadership of the base. So we'll give you a salute too. Thank you to everyone. And we will now open the floor up to questions and comments. At this point, one of the officers with the executive officer leaned over and showed him a piece of paper and talked to him for a few seconds. And the executive officer said, well, as you know, with these meetings, I have others that I need to go to and other activities. I do appreciate that we had this opportunity to explain all this to you, and that we answered all of the questions that you had for us. I don't know that it wasn't missed by anybody that no one had asked any question. And he said, I've got to go. Now, I will tell you that they have given us cardboard boxes. One of the boxes has a copy of the interface control panel for the drone. Another box has a computer server in it that can run a simulation of the drone. There is monitors and a keyboard, and we have a manual for how this combat aviation group works. We'll hand a manual to all of the people who are involved in this. He reached in one of the boxes and pulled out a bound document. It looked like it was 1.5 inches thick. He said, of course, we're going to want you guys to get through this and understand it, and we hope have a lot of it committed to memory. We, the leadership, understand that you have to do this work, and we will try to adjust your schedule so that you have the ability to take over this combat aviation group. We will not put together a situation where you can't get your combat aviation group work to be done. And again, thank you to everyone. The executive officer stood up, his officer stood up, all of the other sergeants stood up. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out of the room. There was a bit of a pause, and then a lot of Charlie's friends began holding their arms out like little birds and flying around and pointing at him and saying, "Well, Charlie, we didn't know you were a pilot or a flying person. What fun." Others who were friends of Sergeant Monroe and the friends of the ground crew, they all gathered around him and were talking, and it became clear that really the meeting was done, and people began to leave. Sergeant Monroe was kind of standing there and was looking at the door. She noticed that Charlie was looking at her, and Charlie pointed at the chair beside him. He was not sitting, he was just standing there. And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and he pointed at the chair, and she looked at him and shrugged her shoulders, and he pointed at the chair. And so she finally walked over and stood next to him and said, "What is wrong with that chair?" He said, "That's not it. Just if you would stand here, and we'll let everybody leave, and you and I'll be here." And she said, "Oh." And with that, the room emptied out. At this point, Charlie sat down with her and said, "Hello, Charles Miller, known as Charlie. That's the name I go by. You are absolutely welcome to call me Charlie. You are Carol Monroe." "I guess Carolyn, is that?" She said, "Carol is fine." She said, "Oh, I have a nickname my friends have given to me. I have no idea where that nickname came from. Some people call me that." Charlie said, "Well, okay, let me have it." She said, "It's Carmo, Carmo. I don't know why they call me Carmo. I can't get them to stop." Charlie smiled and said, "Carmo. Well, okay, Carmo, but Carol is fine. I will call you by the name that you want." She said, "Whatever you want to do." Charlie said, "Well, I'm just wanted you to sit down for a moment and let us talk. I've never been in the cockpit of a flying device, much less been in charge of it. I don't remember when I volunteered for this." Carolyn said, "I don't remember when I volunteered for any of this." Charlie said, "Well, I think we have to do it." He said, "Obviously," and I am attempting here to sort of think on my feet, although I'm seated, so I guess I'm thinking on my butt. I'm sure that is probably going to show eventually. You know, we're up in the air flying in this device, and if something goes wrong, particularly if it's seriously wrong, you and I are going to be a wet spot on the desert floor. And the crew will be sad and the base will be troubled, and we will be a wet spot on the floor of the desert. So I think we have more connection to this than they do. And I'm just wandering through how this is. I know they said I'm in charge and running it, but I do not want you to think that I consider myself as above you or better than you or more smart than you or any of that. I see you as an equal. I see us as having a special status because we are the ones up in the air and we are the ones that don't exist anymore if something bad happens. So I did want you to know I did put in an application to be perfect. I thought maybe just for 24 hours, I wanted to know what that's like, and hopefully I could remember. I was not accepted by the program. I want you to know that I have the ability to bring all the documents together and look at the data and use my experience and training, talk to my friends, think through the issues, get a clear head, take a deep breath, and come up with the wrong answer. And I would like to say I've done this once, but actually I've done this more than one time. And the reason I'm telling you this is you and I are in this flying machine and we're together. And I am happy to have the concept. You, please, if I'm not doing something smart, intelligent, or proper, you have my permission to put your face right in my face and say, Charlie, let's not do this. Your plan is stupid. I do not mind if you do that. I might get irritated or pout. I might argue with you, but I don't mind at all. And I want you to have the opinion that you are an even member of this team. He said, I'm trying to think of everything else. And Carolyn said, well, while you're thinking of everything else, I do want you to know that I, too, put in for the program of perfection. I thought perhaps for 2 years I would be perfect. That struck me as long enough for me to learn about that. And I also was not accepted into that program. So I have balled up my little fisties and stamped my feet on the ground and gotten all wound up in a very emotional, sometimes angry fashion and raced off to work through the problem that I had completely solved in my head. And actually, I too was actually wrong. So in the same sense that you have said, at any point, you have my permission. You can put your hand on my shoulder and look right at me and say, Carolyn, easy, stop. Let's not do this. You might not have the right answer. I do not mind. In the same sense that you're talking, I am talking. I don't mind. Charlie said, well, I appreciate that, and we will go down this pathway together. I would say we're skipping along, whistling a happy tune and holding hands, but somehow I think creating combat aviation out of nothing is not going to be that. I need for you to understand what the other 3 guys, the ground crew, you and I are up in the plane, and again, things go wrong, and they're upset and sad, and you and me, we are a wet spot on the desert floor. So when I'm not there, even when I am there, you are the second in command. If I'm not there, they need to talk to you. I don't think that the ground crew people should create any plan, procedure, fix, technique turn something on that should be off or off that should be on, or make any plans or decisions that we don't know about. I don't think that should happen. And I will, I'm hoping that you can, as we work through this, they can begin to understand that you are second in command and extremely equal to me in my mind, and everything, all the decisions go through us. He said, I've never run a department. I have 5 hours easy of schedules and documents and procedures that I'm supposed to be doing for my military policeman activities. And I don't know anybody, any of my people or my supervisors that are jumping forward to do all that work for me. So I don't totally understand how this is going to work exactly. And the reason I'm mentioning this is particularly as we create this out of nothing, I believe I'm going to have to go to the XO and the leadership officers with issues and problems and work through with them how this will work. So I have a feeling you're going to be there in that facility area with the ground crew while I'm not there, and I will be advocating for us. And again, it's going to be important that they understand when I'm not there, you're in charge. When I am there, you really are almost exactly equal to me. And I will allow you to use your female skills and all of your other military training, experience, and knowledge to slowly, I hope, bring this to their attention that it's going to work like that. I don't know that you should set off a nuclear bomb, but you should bring them around to the concept that's how this works. For example, they had told me that we're supposed to go to the cafeteria to read these documents because they're not serving a meal right now. But we're not going to be able to study all this and work out of the cafeteria. That's not going to work. And we have all this work that we're supposed to do. We're going to have to get support for us not doing, flying a plane with people in it, perhaps medically injured people. I think we need 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. I don't know that we need to have a lot of on-call responsibilities. If they're going to be making us go fly in these planes, we need to be able to learn. And I think I'm going to have to go to the executive officer and say, where is our repair facility? Where is our garage, or whatever they call it for airplanes, and our offices? So this is going to start out with me. We might need, I have my military police radio, but I don't know that they're going to want me using that for this. I'm going to have to work through that. But it's a process, and we'll just have to make this function. And so, unless you have other comments or remarks, then I suppose we should gather up these books and equipment and stuff, and I guess go over to the cafeteria for the moment and start learning all of this. And I just wanted to say all that to you right here at the very beginning, and be sure you see how I'm seeing this. And again, to reiterate, I'm happy you're here. You seem like a very nice person. I'm glad that I'm working with you. I've only known you now for 90 seconds, but I think you're a good person, and I'm happy to work with you. And I don't want to be a wet spot on the desert floor. I'm just guessing that you don't either. So we need to make this work in a proper way. And Carolyn looked at him and said, I agree with you, and let's go put together Greenville Base Combat Aviation Group. And with that, they gathered up the boxes of the manuals. The other ground crew guys had taken all of the computers and the simulation and the interface board. All that was left were 3 or 4 of the manuals for Sergeant Miller and Sergeant Monroe. They gathered them up and walked out of the door. And with that moment was created and born Greenville Base Combat Aviation Group.